Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Prevue's webinar, The Art of Hotel Negotiations. I'm Associate Editor Lisa Simonson, and I'll be the moderator today. First off, let us know where you're joining us from. We have a chat going, so we'd love to know what your destination cities are. You can also drop in questions anytime. We will be answering your questions at the end, time permitting. Also in the chat will be the white paper for this particular webinar. And so I'd like to introduce our panelists at this time. We're very privileged to have the knowledge and expertise of three special guests who will be sharing their insights and strategies in negotiating with hotels within today's changed environment. So first we have with us Victoria Batten, Regional Director of Sales and Marketing North America, Langham Hospitality Group. Victoria spent 20 years in the luxury hotel landscape at Langham's flagship hotel in London before transferring to New York City in a newly created regional role in the March of 2019. We also have Jacqueline Bernstein, President and Partner of Empire Force Events, New York City's longest independent and locally owned destination management company. Jacqueline also served on the board of directors for New York City Tourism and Conventions and has received many industry awards over the years. Welcome. We're also delighted to welcome Ann Gorman, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Streamline Events, who has spent her career tackling all facets of the agency side of the business, from on-site operations to strategic planning and sales management, and is now responsible for developing and driving revenue growth strategies. So welcome to the three of you. We're so glad to have you here. A couple of things again before we start. Today's session will be recorded and you will receive a link via email, so don't worry if you miss something. In addition, all attendees will be receiving one CEU from the Events Industry Council for your participation today. So I see hello from Boston, hello from Charlotte, hello from Richmond. We're so glad to have you all with us today. A lot of different, Dallas, Texas, awesome. And again, today's webinar will be recorded and emailed to everyone who has signed up. So your questions again will be answered at the end, time permitting. So let's get into it. We're going to start off talking to our panelists about pricing. The first question is, what new charges are you seeing that you might not have seen before, and how do you negotiate these? So Jacqueline, would you like to start us off on this?
I was actually going to defer to my colleague, Ann. She had a juicy one to talk about.
Okay, sure. Go right ahead, Ann.
I'm usually not one that's so quiet, so go for it, Ann.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were chatting before this about a situation we're in right now with a hotel partner where we learned on the final bill post-program that our bottom line comp room credit was being treated as those comp rooms are being treated as revenue rooms, and we were told that our comp room credit put us into attrition. So that was a new one for a lot of us. You know, in the contract was pretty clear that it was a bottom line comp room credit, and now we're in this whole back and forth with the hotel because they want to say that the comp rooms put us into attrition. And this happens occasionally a little bit with things like food and beverage, where, you know, you're told that you've met your food and beverage minimum, but, you know, and now you qualify for your discount, but that discount then puts you below your minimum, so you don't get the discount. And you get caught in this weird back and forth. And there's some pretty significant budget implications with that are challenging to work through.
Okay, thank you. So we can go on to the next question for you, Jacqueline, or anybody else.
Well, I'm going to jump in, and something that's not necessarily new that we have talked about is about the concept of resort fees or entertainment fees. And we were joking about how, although I'm physically based in New York City and work many different places, that we find it funny to see a resort fee when the hotels here aren't necessarily a resort. And we understand the concept amongst us family here in hospitality. some of us don't understand why those fees are added, but we know what the actual name means. We always state in saying that when you're coming to New York City, and sometimes people are thinking, why is my hotel room so small? Or why is the rate so high? It's like, because New York City is your resort. But on the flip side here, there is some controversy. We joked about how it was not a political statement, in the State of the Union address about resort fees and those additional fees being added. And Anne was mentioning how there's some crazy lawsuits out there. I've been reading up in the industry press. So there are some concerns about that and what actually is being paid for. I mean, if it's a hotel that potentially has a lot of entertainment and offerings, there could be a reason why it's there, but we're sure that many of you wonderful planners that are out there listening have worked on. I usually don't like the word negotiate, because I don't want to see that it's a negative and a push and pull between the buyers of hotel rooms and planners and the hotels. Concessions shouldn't even be the word. You want to make sure that it's a good logistically and financially well-rounded organization, not so much a negotiation of what fees are being paid and what you're getting the value for. But I know Victoria has something that she wants to add about those resort fees.
Well, I agree that unless, like say in New York, the city is the destination and the resort. And I would challenge a hotel to feel that they're offering a resort experience when they're located here in the city. I think it's different when you're in a hotel. For example, the Langham Huntington Pasadena, we have a guest amenity fee because there's swimming pools, gardens, bicycles, kids activities, s'mores in the evening around a campfire. There are all these things that are going on and laid on for the guests. But when you're staying at a Langham in a city, then there is no resort fee. So I think that's something, going back to hidden fees, that you've really just got to be clear about that. And to Anne's point about the contracting, obviously this is the most important thing, is to have detailed, transparent contracts, and to be making sure that you're talking to your hotel seller or your hotel conference service manager about how you're performing against your concessions, so that it doesn't come as a surprise. And like you say, Anne, for when you're then getting to your F&B minimum, that you're saying, okay, well, so that you're being told by the hotel, you've still got another X amount. What should we do about that? How can we enhance this? How can we make this work? And so that it's a partnership all the way through the planning process, so that there are no surprises at the end.
Absolutely.
One of the people in the chat is saying our area calls it a destination fee, which is kind of what you've been talking about. Our second question was going to be about hidden fees. Is there anything else maybe that we haven't covered that you would like to give as an example of a hidden fee that you've been faced with or had come up? Anybody?
Not so much a hidden fee, but we chatted about this in our planning for this webinar. And this is not only specific to hotels, but venues and restaurants off property as well, is that the percentage that's added on top of food and beverage in some places is up to 28% plus. So it's not so much hidden, but it's not just the gratuity. It's that gratuity percentage, venue fee, which we should have another webinar on that. What really is the venue fee? Administrative fee. So we've seen all that different verbiage there, and you're paying an additional 28%, whereas the ye old gratuity might just have been a flat 20%. And then you get that small print where this percentage is not being distributed to the staff. This is for the hotel to do administrative work at the venue. So then us, and as well as you as the end client planners, are thinking, now I got to add on top of that 28%. On top of that, now I have to, tip out, et cetera. So it's not so much hidden. We think it should be more expressed, right? And really detailed, and what that percentage is going on. We've sometimes had to have hotels explain, is it on every element? Is it just the venue rental? Which part of the food and beverage? So it always needs us to be much more transparent and explained, so we know exactly what we're investing in.
And I think one of the really challenging parts of that is how much those fees can change between the time of contracting and the time of operation. And that does put you in a challenging spot. And I think hotels are doing as good a job as they can. And, as agencies, we try and ask all the right questions. But when you contract something 2 years in advance and you budget for it, and then between that and the time that it actually operates, service fees have gone up 5%, or there's a new administration fee that isn't budgeted for, that's really challenging.
Correct. Also, of course, then you have some destinations where there's a tourism fee or, you know, that the state is implementing that we need to keep an eye out for as well.
Mhm.
And seeing in the chat here, someone had asked about how common is it for service charge fees to be taxed? And we always find it funny when they aren't taxed or because we just find it interesting how some venues and properties decide to do it and some don't. It would seem that it is a cost and they should, but obviously that just inflates it even more. If New York City, you're having 28 to 38%, and then you're adding 8.875%, you all do the math. And someone, chatted about AV charges, and well, that again could be a whole nother day
It's a
webinar.
whole separate webinar.
And Anne, there was a question specifically for you pertaining to what you were just talking about. What was in the contract that you were talking about, the written policies that were mentioned in the contract?
Oh, the contract says
differences.
the comp rooms are below the line.
So keep on fighting then, Anne.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the plan.
Okay, great. So, Victoria, have the pressures from revenue management and ownership increased for you?
Yes, and when I said for me, for the commercial team, I think that certainly now the revenue management, is very involved during the sales process, perhaps much more so than in the past. Every single hotel is looking for that group and events based business in order to be able to yield up their other segments, and whether that's group or whether it's catering. Obviously, catering, without having catering business on the books, then it's very difficult to forecast and to plan as to how is food and beverage going to be profitable each month, because without the volume of catering and events, without the room rental coming through, then hotels that are operating other food and beverage outlets, then it's difficult for those to be profitable without that base. So certainly, revenue management's involved with the group rate, and when, hopefully when we can really get engaged with the planner and we can discuss, what do we need to do? If I can get you this rate, will you be able to move ahead? If I can include these concessions, how is that going to look for you? That's why we really want that conversation, so that we can understand how to really tailor the proposal and make sure that we're in a good place to win the business, and create that base. Obviously, what we would like to do is have as much base business on the books as far ahead as possible. And I think that we are seeing lead time lengthening. We're seeing, I think that Jacqueline and Anne are nodding to that as well. We've hopefully, obviously they're still in the month for the month business in a lot of different destinations, but it would be great to see further planning further out, and not just giving us the inquiries and the leads, but actually moving through to contract further out.
Okay. Anyone else have a thought on that, or we can move on to what you were just talking about a bit, top quality F&B, despite the higher costs. Do you have any tips about providing that?
I think one of the smartest things that you can do is think about it from a sustainability standpoint. The less food waste there's going to be, then that equals a lower food cost. And if there's a lower food cost, then it's a lower price to you. When we were chatting before this, I recently heard a stat, and I won't take credit for this. I heard it from someone else. I'll share it with all of you, and please feel free to pass it on. If you're doing a plated dinner and you get the attendee's choice of entree ahead of time. So, we always think it's so old fashioned and sort of corny to ask, would you like the chicken or the beef at the final night dinner? Like, oh, we're not going to do that. If you do that, it reduces food waste by 85%. And I think that's a wonderful stat, and something that if we shared with our attendees, this is why we're asking you this question, because we're being conscientious of food waste. And so we'd like to know what you want to have. I mean, if I was asked that question, I would gladly and think very highly of the organization who was planning an event like that. And then it leads to lower food cost and a lower price for the end user as well.
Love to
That's
hear.
a very happy chef who then knows what he needs to, or he or
Exactly,
she
yes.
needs to prepare in advance. And like you say, brings down the menu cost.
Mhm.
And everyone wants to be sustainable. And we understand that there are companies that just have to forego it for reasons of, we would never ask what they're going to dine on 3 months out or a week out. However, there's a clever way to put that on the invitation or on the agenda. And if they see it written, just like Ann mentioned with that stat, people would take note and say, you know what, it's not so old school. It's much more forward thinking to do that. And so I'm stealing that. I don't know who it is to give credit, but that is wonderful to do. And we just did a gala event here in New York, and they had beautiful little place cards where they had what the food choices were, so it was easier for the servers. So there you go. Everything old is new again, I guess.
Personalization and food choice and being able to orchestrate a meal that's inclusive as well, I think is a really important part of thinking about the food and beverage experience today. You know, not being able within your buffet or your food stations to accommodate as many of the dietary requests as you can, so that you know, you're going down the buffet line and the people who are dairy free or vegan or vegetarian or gluten free are able to be part of the same meal experience as everyone else, I think is wonderful. And it doesn't necessarily address lowering your food costs, but I think that's a great rationalization for some of the higher food costs. This is a really important part of the experience and a really important thing we're doing here to be inclusive of all of our attendees. And so it's worth the higher cost to be able to do that for everyone.
Right. And
Yeah.
you mentioned food preferences, and that could again be another webinar. Is it food preferences or food allergies or requirements? You know, I don't like to eat mushrooms, then don't eat mushrooms, right? You know, to work your way around it. Again, that's a whole other conversation. It also is something for us being indigenous. Let's just focus on New York, that we respect that clients and planners have, let's say, food and beverage minimums at their hotels. But if you don't need to do, let's say, that breakfast and that conversation about what gallons of coffee are going to cost, that there could be something cleverer where if the guests are on own, to make an arrangement, have your local event production, destination magic company anywhere with maybe a local place that's within walking distance, a deli, and you have some entertainment there. So the guests can go off property, grab their coffee, grab a bagel with a schmear in New York City, and make that part of the experience. And talk to the hotel and state, we're going to put the money into the big dinner or the lunch or whatever else it may be, or a beautiful food break that you're going to do, but it's just not necessary for that breakfast. We want to, you know, get them off property and do something like that.
Yeah. Another idea I had to share was perhaps including some kind of activation, so that bit like Jacqueline's saying, so that the actual menu is not the key focus. So for example, we hosted an event, we had a sound bath. So we had our clients had a sound bath, and then there was a light, healthy breakfast afterwards. And so the breakfast was actually secondary to the sound bath and the wellness opportunity. But then there was fruit and smoothies and, you know, bite-sized options, but it wasn't about having a, you know, big sit down breakfast. So that might also be a way of making your F&B budget go a bit further. Or alternatively, depending obviously on venues, but being able to make use of the restaurants and bars in your hotel and save on transporting your, you know, your delegates out. Obviously, we totally understand that, you know, we have to showcase the destination, we want to give local experiences, but you don't need to do that every single evening. You could take over the bar on an exclusive basis, take over the restaurant, use half the restaurant, and add to your food and beverage minimum, which helps with the contracting, and save on the transportation, which of course is sustainable as well, unless everybody's walking, that you don't have to have that bus outside to take people off site.
And going back to, again, just using an example, because Victoria has a property in New York and we're here as well, that many will say, well, I'm only in the hotel for 3 nights. I can't be on property all 3 nights. We're the resort in New York City, right? However, again, we as your partners with you and knowing that you have, let's say, an F&B minimum, or there are other venues at the hotel that maybe your guests haven't experienced, like the restaurant, that maybe it's not the whole event that's handled there, but we do this often where we take them to a Broadway show and meet the members of the cast after the show at the hotel restaurant. So then you get some of that hotel experience, you get to see another part of the property, and you're satisfying some of your F&B minimum. And it's still, an enlightening experience of seeing something in New York City. Something else when we talk about saving on menus, and again, back to New York, you couldn't tell by the accent, New York City has the best water in the world. We have been known to promote New York City tap water. Water is a big conversation at hotels. You don't want to spend money on the plastic. You want to be sustainable. Some people don't like the water in a box. We know that some people frown upon having the water cooler, but it is okay to not pour bottled water, whether it be whatever brand, we're not going to talk about it, at, let's say, your dinner or lunch, and using tap water. So just think of clever ways that you could promote that, and that's a great way to save money.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to a restaurant, then you have tap water poured out of a jug. So do that
But they should.
at an event as well.
You
So
should
we
also find out, oh, I'm sorry, just one last point
Yeah,
here.
no problem.
If you're a group that's already coming into a hotel, we're talking about in the month, for the month, love that, right? And there's another larger group there than you, or smaller group, find out what they're having for lunch. It'll really be helpful to the chef and working with what's on property. What are they doing? How many of you have, seen chicken one night and then chicken salad the next day, right? So it's great to see how it could be maximized, what other groups and what other diners are having, so they can make it, even across, let's say, the whole big meeting floors.
Okay, so we've been talking about F&B and savings there. Somebody has a question: while negotiating for lower hotel rates, what's the best way to leverage your company's marketing channels to add value for the hotel? Or are hotels not interested in that type of value bartering? Maybe Victoria.
That's a
has
good
something?
question. Yeah. I think it's obviously, every one of these requests would be on an ad hoc basis. It's going to be about, is that marketing opportunity valuable to the hotel? Certainly, for example, the Langham, New York, we just hosted an event with Saks Fifth Avenue that we were looking for the same types of clients. And so it was of value to both of us. I would suggest that the client needs to be upfront about this at the time of making the inquiry, so that we are thinking about that when we're preparing the proposal. That would be most helpful. And it's really about whether it's going to add value. So I would say, yes, please, put it forward. I was going to add that when, to maximize budgets, it's all, what would be really helpful from a hotel point of view is to have flexibility on the day of the week pattern. For example, come Sunday rather than coming on a Tuesday. We're seeing especially in the city hotels, a lot of that peak midweek pattern. Everybody wants to come on a Tuesday, Wednesday, whether it's a group, whether it's a corporate traveler. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you get to the point where, we have sold out hotels. But and then of course the price, the demand's higher, the pricing is higher. Whereas if you have flexibility for people to arrive Sunday evening or even on a Monday, Tuesday rather than a Tuesday, Wednesday, then that would enable us to be able to be, to price that lower, and also consider seasonality. So, this is high season in New York now, but Q1, New York, Chicago, Boston, you might be able to have an experience at a hotel that you might not think of, that your budget was stretched to during another part of the year. The Langham Chicago in Q1 will be far less expensive than in May. So just considering whether you're really fixed in the time of year when you're planning this event, or whether you do have flexibility.
That sounds great. Thank you. So regarding service now, if we could move on to that section. Planners are expecting the same level of service as we had pre-pandemic, not always getting it. So if you could tell us what you're experiencing as planners, maybe Anne or Jacqueline?
Yeah, I think in the upper luxury, segment of the market, I do think service levels have by and large returned to pre-pandemic levels and are absolutely meeting expectations. You know, for the most part, everything's fully staffed. You are getting that really, really high touch luxury service. There's daily housekeeping, daily turn down, 24-hour room service. All of that stuff is back. Outside upper luxury, I think, is where you find varying degrees of service levels. And I think as planners, what I would challenge us all is to really, I don't know that we're expecting the same as pre-pandemic. I think we've been in this post-pandemic reality long enough to understand that, daily housekeeping isn't a reality at a lot of hotels anymore. And from our perspective, what we're seeing is that it actually doesn't matter very much to our attendees. And they're perfectly fine with that, and it's okay. And so don't have that be a focus area of yours anymore. What can be really challenging, and some of the questions you need to ask is, are there days of the week or certain meals that some of your food and beverage outlets are closed? And so we need to know that, because we've chosen to, forego a huge buffet breakfast, but we need to make sure all of your restaurants are open then for breakfast, things like that. Banquet staff that is brand new, and doesn't quite have things, isn't quite in their groove. That can still be pretty challenging. So I think those are some of the areas that are a little bit more important to focus on, whereas the conversation still tends to largely be around, room service and housekeeping and things like that, that I actually don't think impact the attendee experience all that much.
There's somebody saying here they agree that luxury resort service levels have returned 100% for them. So
Yeah,
they
I'm
are
glad
having
to hear that.
wonderful
Absolutely.
experiences.
Yeah, I think almost if you are not staying in a luxury hotel, then you could position the housekeeping not being daily from a sustainable point of view as well, to spin it around, that's turn it into a positive.
And I think, the room service issue, we were talking about this, a lot of what Jacqueline was sharing, a lot of hotels in New York no longer have room service. But I think a lot of people are very accustomed to using Uber Eats or DoorDash or things like that, where that really isn't the challenge it used to be. Just because you can't have room service doesn't mean you have to go sit in the restaurant and have dinner anymore.
And a lot of hotels have come up with a marketplace in their property, where I've heard that a lot of guests are feeling it's much better, almost like going to the local deli, but it's right there in their hotel. And Ann, you were mentioning that a lot of times if you order room service, that's what you're getting. You're getting that prepaid salad delivered up to you. Maybe that's also becoming very old school, the big cart coming in and all those condiments that are laid out there. I think it also depends on the style of the property. We do still hear, though, whether it's hotels and even other venues in hospitality, that we just don't have the number of staff. There are certain things that need to be cut. So as someone was saying here, that maybe that restaurant might be closed, which just seems odd on a Sunday night, because it's, hotels don't traditionally in New York have a lot of check-ins on a Sunday. So that might happen. But that's something that
it's the quietest night of the week.
Yes, exactly.
So, but like you say, it's all about the communication so that we know about it in advance.
And
but I see
maybe then that's the opportunity, because if a restaurant is ordinarily closed on a Sunday, then take that restaurant and have it as an exclusive use experience.
Event space, sure.
Because then it's all incremental revenue. You're not displacing revenue. It's not like on a busy Thursday night where the restaurant is thinking, oh, I've got to cover my usual takings. This would be entirely, obviously they have to bring the team in, etc. And it will depend if they've got 2 brigades or just 1. But it might be an opportunity for both parties.
Well, and we have this discussion, and think about us when we go to our industry events, right? What happens, the end of the night after the offsite function, everyone's back at the bar. So a smart planner would state, we know our guests, be prepared. If they drinks more drinks, we all do well, right? The hotel and the planners, et cetera. So that's something that you need to know what your guests are and how that flow is going to work best to make sure that they're staffed up properly.
Yeah, and then so equally, we need to know that that's what's most likely going to happen, because I do think, especially I think in New York, that the bars are closing earlier now generally.
Yeah.
I think that perhaps the trend for late night drinking has changed post-pandemic, and but of course, you know, a hotel, they can just man and plan accordingly.
And those are to, you know, comment on something that was put in the chat. Those are absolutely like service level standards that you should put in your contract. If you know you're going to want the bar open to, you know, a certain hour, if you know the gym needs to be open early because your attendees all want to be there, if you know you want a certain ratio of, you know, servers per table, put that in the contract, and then you can put then, you know, repercussions and consequences if those service levels are not met.
Yeah, I saw that too in the chat about including service levels in the contract that you're
Mhm.
expecting. So personally, with your companies and your hotel, are your staffing levels back to where they were, or what are you doing to
Absolutely.
acquire talent?
To speak on behalf of Langham Hotels, then yes, we're absolutely staffed fully and working, you know, continue to work really hard on retaining the talent that we have through the hotel culture, you know, which really starts at the top with the general manager. You know, general managers who know every single colleague's name, has a point of contact, has a personal connection with that colleague, which really helps then form the commitment and loyalty of the colleague to the hotel. You know, fun things, you know, just to help, you know, everybody likes to feel recognized. We know that our guests like to feel special, but we know that our colleagues like to feel special, whether they've received a mention in a guest survey, then, you know, they get a shout out, you know, all these kinds of things, recognizing housekeeping week, recognizing, you know, it's been a great month. We're going to have a celebration lunch in the staff restaurant today. You know, little things that make the colleagues feel constantly recognized. I think that retaining talent is so much easier than finding new talent, because talent acquisition is very challenging. We know that during the pandemic, a lot of great salespeople left the industry. They've found other industries that perhaps they provide a better work-life balance, or perhaps provide higher compensation. Some of them definitely have come back because they realize that they are hoteliers at heart and they miss the hospitality industry. But we have to be more open about who we will employ and really search for the right, you know, the right character and the right aptitude rather than necessarily skills, because we can teach skills. We're not, you know, brain surgeons. We can teach people, but it's really about the attitude. It's about the service culture. It's about the smile and the willingness to engage with guests.
For soft skills more than
the soft skills. Exactly. Obviously, I'd love that everybody to have that, plus then be great salespeople, but we can teach the sales bit more so, I think, through, you know, great training, using great training providers. Yes, but I think that what we all need to think about is how we're going to get more people keen to join the hospitality industry. And we, you know, we suffered a lot during the pandemic, and obviously a lot of people, you know, we gave the impression to everyone that it's a bit of an uncertain industry to be in, and a lot of people lost their livelihood. And so we've really got to work hard at you know, shouting about what a great industry this is: hospitality, travel, events. It's, you know, it's a fun place to be.
How about Anne or Jacqueline? Any comments on acquiring and retaining talent?
You know, the acquiring talent, I think the hiring for soft skills is absolutely our focus too. I think that's, you know, how we've found some of our best people. You can train on the, you know, some of the day-to-day, you know, SOPs of the roles. But we feel like that's really helping set us up for success in kind of the next phase. We're sort of really embracing how much AI is going to change the reality of our business. And really feel like we have a team that is set up and ready for that, you know, as our value evolves with, you know, what our day-to-day roles and responsibilities are, we have a team of people who are curious and creative and hardworking, so that will be able to evolve with the purpose of our business. In terms of retaining people, I think Burnout in our industry is a real problem that we are going to have to address and change if we want to attract people to the industry and keep them in the industry. This is a whole bunch of really wonderful, smart, hardworking, type A driven people who are willing to do whatever it takes to make our events successful. But there's a balance that I think we all have to collectively be a little bit better about finding if this industry is going to continue to thrive.
Sure, and it's a great question that's not just specific to hotels and being event producers and destination managers. We always state that we could teach anyone the logistics, whether it be dispatching a vehicle, loading coaches, tour guiding an activity, advancing food and beverage and entertainment and decorative design, but you can't teach people to care about it. And that's the part about hospitality and the gathering business that was so prevalent on the media when everything was shut down. That's what's so important to us. I mean, we just finished 2 waves of 1,000 guests for 18 days on site. We had over 50 staff running amok everywhere, but they still had to be there bright and early in the morning. You end at 2 a.m. You're back again at 5, and you have to smile and get through it. And you try to take care of your own and making sure that the service is there. And that's truly what happens at a hotel. There's that staff person that just kept hitting that button when you walked into the hotel, so the door opens automatically for you, right? It starts there, and then everything else falls into place. So it's important to try to keep those of us in the industry as passionate as all of you that are sitting here on the webinar and listening, and those of us that we obviously care about it and show that to our clients and our guests.
Thank you. Somebody says, love that, Jacqueline. I agree. So, and somebody else said, well said, Anne. So getting a lot of good feedback here.
Thank you. I do want to comment. You had one quick thing about pricing in our notes, and it talked about housekeeping. And housekeeping is always one of those where you might put into your contract and, I don't know, the housekeeper switched her room or her shift, or she's not there. Pardon me for saying she, that was rude of me. So I respect where we're at with that. We like to do sometimes is when maybe in hospitality or check-in or in their registration pack, whatever it may be, maybe you give everyone an envelope that has, the company logo and a thank you to the housekeeper and whatever the amount of cash, and then your guests, God willing, they're going to be trustworthy and leave it there each morning. And it might have a little note or something inspirational. So they can leave each morning when you finish in the bathroom, leave this for your housekeeper. So they're getting the hard, cold cash right then and there, as opposed to be built in with your contract. It goes a long way as opposed to waiting for checkout and all. So it's just something to make sure that those unsung heroes that are doing a job that maybe none of us want to do here, although if you are in the hotel business and you were in housekeeping at one point, you really know how your hotel operates. But that's just another clever way to give back and take care of the people that are doing service.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to site selection, and we'll probably get back to some of these other topics later. Has your site selection process changed, and how? I guess Anne or Jacqueline, well, anybody could weigh in on that.
It definitely has. I think, one of the kind of unconventional things that we're trying to do a little bit more often, as much as possible, is not cast the widest net possible, to really be more targeted. And if being more targeted means we have to go through a couple of phases and a couple of rounds, so be it. But to be a little bit more targeted with your reach out, I think we're seeing a much better response from our hotel partners, because they're not getting a lead in Cvent that they see is sent out to 10 different cities and 5 hotels, in each city. The leads are taken a little bit more seriously. Keeping it small and tight with your reach outs allows a little bit more opportunity for conversation and collaboration with the hotel partners to see if something's going to work. And then if it doesn't work out, then we can move on and we can recast the net rather than casting the widest net possible. It seems like it would be more efficient to cast the widest net possible and get your answers back quickly, but it backfires on you a little bit, and we found it's not worth it. So whenever possible, I think that's something that we've tried to do a little bit. There is still very much the reality that we're experiencing where we can get the rate and availability and put it into the beautiful executive, presentation ready to go. And it just sits. and there's no movement there towards a decision, and that's challenging, and that's one of the realities. One of the things when we had this conversation back towards the beginning of the year that we talked about is very thorough and longer site inspections. So you're not just doing the quick pop in to see the meeting space and see the guest rooms and make sure it's going to work. You want to stay for a couple of nights because you want to experience the food and beverage outlets. You want to see the hotel in action a little bit more, experience the service levels. And so those site inspections take a little bit longer.
Okay.
And hopefully during that site inspection, you really get a good idea of who's going to be your ideal hotel partner.
Yes, exactly.
Based on the effort and energy that goes into that site inspection. And like you say, you see the hotel in action when nobody's looking, you know, that you really get a good idea of that, what that experience will be. And from a hotel point of view, we love that because then it's our perfect opportunity to get the client to the hotel and for them to see the hotel in action. And take, you know, get that firsthand experience.
Yeah.
We respect that, obviously, clients, when they're looking to come to a destination, not just us here in the New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut area, but anywhere, always will say to their local event production destination management company partners, let us figure out the hotel and then we'll be in touch with you about all else. And we state to them, we know you're not contracting us to do your hotel. It's not outsourcing. You have your NSO and GSOs and your research of what you're going to do. However, you as clients should utilize your local partners to give you, when I say pros and cons, it's not that that hotel's terrible. It's based on what you're looking for. Maybe you want this hotel in that location as opposed to that one. We know what it's like working in that ballroom or whatever it may be. So to engage your local partners in what you're looking to achieve with your hotel, we are able to help your site selection and make your site inspection much more productive. We get this here again, just referring to New York. I got the accent, so I got to run with it, right? That, well, why am I spending so much in this hotel? I'm not going to have funds to do anything else. Maybe then you shouldn't be at a hotel at that level. Based on what your needs are, maybe listening to the outline of your program and your flow, that a different hotel and a different property that you weren't thinking of would then help you to do everything else that you want to achieve locally. Again, the resort of New York. That's gonna be a big takeaway here from this meeting. So that's just so important because we're operating at that hotel all the time, those hotels locally, to be able to give you that feedback to guide you in the right site selection process.
Yeah. I'd just like to go back, sorry, to go back to Anne's point about not casting the net so wide. Obviously, we're all busy. None of us, whatever part of the jigsaw puzzle we operate in, we're all very busy. And, you know, I hate to hear that planners are not hearing back from hotel salespeople quickly enough, or if at all. Obviously, there has been a lot of change in teams, but I, you know, obviously would like to think that, you know, the salespeople are getting back to you quickly. But of course, when we really want to engage and have a conversation about the lead. You know, we know that Cvent is really useful and helpful to everybody, but we still really like to have a conversation, and we'd love to be able to speak to you on the phone and to talk it through, and then help quickly understand whether this is the right piece of business for the hotel, whether we're the right hotel for the planner, for the booking. And it can save so many voicemail messages, chasing so many emails back and forth if we can just speak on the phone. So that's sort of my request would be, please take 5 minutes to have that phone conversation, and then it will save a lot of time in the future. And if you're just, and if you have sent it to such a wide group, then it makes it, and if it's for a year's time, we still need to know if there's an update, because we are still wanting to move our pipeline along, just like you all are. And so tell us to call back in a month, but don't tell us to keep hold of it for 6 months and then get back in touch, because, you know, hopefully there'll be other leads that come through and we'll, you know, have to move on. So just a little bit of empathy on both sides. We don't want to be calling you every day asking for an update, and likewise, we would appreciate updates when you have them, or a time frame as to when there will be an update.
And one last point on that, that's so true. And we love that personal touch, right? About hospitality. It shouldn't be so transactional through CVent or however else you're looking for hotels to speak with someone live. But also you all might put so many specs down there and you're focusing on what your concessions are. Again, it shouldn't be so negative, like I have to concede to something. It should be a little more fluid, maybe about what your space needs are, because again, your local partners can state, oh, they told you no on CVent. Well, we happen to know that they could fit something in that restaurant, or, there's a venue right next door that they partner with a lot. Sometimes the hotel caters there. So again, those local partners can help and be innovative in how to solve just your bullet points of issues that are just going into a CVent or any organization like that, an NSO, GSO vacuum.
A lot of people are commenting about, thank you, Victoria. We love having the conversation. It's something that's been lost. And on the sales side, it's frustrating for sales managers. They feel like they're being ghosted after they have a planner who wants a proposal.
/cancelled.
Yeah.
Right. So moving on, though, if we could, because I want to make sure we get to wellness and sustainability. How are you dealing with increased questions about wellness? Is this coming up from your clients as well as on the hotel side?
It
Wellness.
comes up, yes. I think one of the really interesting truths that I think we're trying to collectively face and figure out how to deal with it is that wellness, the way we're doing it as an industry, isn't really as important to the attendees as we all think it is. The way we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at studies that have been published, reasons why attendees attend events or what is important to them about the events, wellness ranks really, really low on that list.
Okay.
We think of wellness as some healthier meal choices and a group yoga class in the morning. And that isn't really what wellness is to the attendees. Wellness to the attendees is having a day that isn't so jam-packed that they don't have a moment to think or breathe. And then they head right from back-to-back sessions into a reception that is so loud because we thought there should be live music there as well for atmosphere, that they can't talk to anybody, and it's overwhelming and overstimulated after a day jam-packed with content.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we should be thinking about when we think about wellness at an event, is how do we create environments where we aren't overstimulating attendees, where everybody is able to experience the event as they want, where there are spaces for people who do run at that level every day, and there are ways for people who don't run at that level every day to get just as much out of the event. I think that's a little bit more what we need to be thinking about when we think about wellness, not the yoga class we set up in the morning, because that's a relatively easy thing to coordinate.
A bit more, that's a bit prescribed, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's there will be wellness and you will do a yoga class, rather than, like you said, sort of this more intuitive, just how are people feeling during the course of their program.
Right, exactly.
So
Yeah,
true.
I've got 10 hoteliers in town this week, and I have to admit it's a hectic schedule. And I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, who is suffering on this week of activity, because it's a lot. And like you said, that we had a team outing and some people actually said, I'm really tired, I'm going to decline. And for the client to, for me as the organizer to not take offense at that and just say, okay, that's no problem, because I know I need you to be good for tomorrow. So that's sort of, like you say, different take on wellness.
Sure, and especially if they're on a business trip and they're traveling, sometimes not starting that meeting at 9, even though that's the work day that starts, but starting at 10 so they can get up, start their morning, whether they do the yoga class or just lay in bed, right? Or they can, what's the saying, do emails, right? They still are on a work trip, so they're still expected to keep up with their work schedule. So sometimes that little afternoon, giving them some time on their own. And there's, again, clever ways your event DMC companies can help you to think about doing that schedule. But we just did a big incentive in where the client did not want to always leave early in the morning. That was just something that was important to them. And having that space, we're all hearing about rooms where the meeting is very loud, the meeting or that reception, Anne, is a good point, but maybe there's a room where it's just much quieter. You know, people have sensory concerns, and we want to really look into that. That's, you know, all part of DEI, and it's not just someone that unfortunately is in a wheelchair or maybe hard of hearing. There are other unseen reasons that we need to look out for our attendees that are beyond.
I love the comment in the chat about, you know, adding in more downtime and personal free time in incentive trips. I think that could apply to meetings too, you know. I think that's important. That is wellness to our attendees, not the way that we historically as an industry have approached wellness.
I like that comment there about a chill room, a quiet room.
Yeah.
I think we all need one of those, but especially when you're on a trip.
Sure.
Decompress for a moment. At least it would help retain what you're learning in some of these sessions.
Right.
So you talked about sustainability a little bit before, but is it also that important a factor? Is it something that is getting requested? The idea of a property or sustainability?
I would say it's a
Meals.
factor and it's part of the conversation. I don't think we see it driving buying decisions quite yet.
Okay.
I do think that's coming, and I welcome that day. I think we see a lot of our hotel partners also see that coming and are getting ready for it. They're being able to, you know, tell you what the carbon footprint of your group is so that you can, you know, commit to a year-over-year reduction of that. There's a great focus on, you know, emphasizing what can be done at the property level, which obviously is a, you know, a huge contributor to it. Again, I don't think it's driving buying decisions, but I do think sustainability is really important to our attendees. And so I think as planners, that's something we have to think about and do a much better job of communicating what is being done to them so that they understand, you know, the decisions that are being made about the way we're designing our events.
And that way the attendee can feel good or less guilty about things that they might be concerned about.
Yeah.
Whether you say for them to bring their own water bottle, or whether you provide a water bottle at the beginning of the event and then have refillable water. Obviously, we talked about water earlier, but you know, I always love an airport where you can fill up your water bottle.
Yeah.
We should have that more readily available. But yeah, I'm interested as to how planners communicate, you know, because obviously as a hotel, we can say we're doing X, Y, Z, but how is that then communicated to the attendee before they actually get here? Going back to the point about if you were at a hotel where there wasn't housekeeping every day, instead of just saying, oh, there wasn't housekeeping today, you know, there isn't going to be housekeeping today because I'm doing my bit, and therefore, you know, that's a good thing.
Yep. Because you're not changing your towels out at home every day either. So let's be real.
Unfortunately not.
Right. So, you know, but if we put it as reminders, that's important. We had an attendee recently that said, it's arrival day. Where's my breakfast? Well, you happen to arrive early. Breakfast starts on the other days. Well, what am I going to do for breakfast? And we're thinking, what did you do when you were home for breakfast? You know, so it's funny when attendees show up and you have to, you know, to combat that.
Well, somebody's saying, I wish hotels had a partnership set up to give food away. And I believe there are some that
I
do
would say
that.
they,
Hotels
most if
and
not all of
restaurants,
them
yeah.
do. Yeah.
You know, the sustainability also tying in with some of that corporate social responsibility. And we're not talking about the team building event where you put together bags. Let's remove that for a moment. But we always try when we're using entertainment. We just did a drum line of Brooklyn kids that do it actually for the Brooklyn Nets. And they were the welcome entertainment as our guests boarded the cruise. Not to take away from entertainment companies that are out there, but that's a really feel-good way to give back to the local community that you're in. We had, again, just so fresh for the past 18 days doing this, coolers on all the coaches with beer and wine and water. We didn't just rent them. We after the pandemic, you don't want to own anything anymore, right? Everyone was selling their wares. So we then donate them so people then can utilize them after. We've all discussed this about where do the florals go after the event. So to put that into play, sometimes there is going to be a financial investment from the client to do the right thing, right? But have that discussion with your local partners to make that happen. Even it would be, let's go back to, let's take all those centerpieces in the hotel and it's Mother's Day coming up. Let all housekeeping take them home. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Just ways that you could just take care of all the partners working the event and nothing goes to waste.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm just going to try to get to a couple questions, and this is a good one, I think, because it's talking about the future. It's good to hear that hotels invest in training, but it's been my experience that many employees are not that well trained. Many are new to the industry and they're not thinking beyond their task. Like you were saying before, somebody about smiling and how things that can't be taught are important. So do you see that happening? Are there too many newbies in the industry, and how is this going to impact going forward?
I think it's all about the induction or orientation plan when a new colleague comes into, I can speak to hotels, but I'm sure it's the same across all businesses, that right from day one, you need to be fully immersed in the culture of that business. And we talk about the Langham Way, which is about going the extra mile, smiling, creating a personal rapport with the guest. And obviously we've hired through because of their soft skills so that they automatically warm to that. You've then got your transactional skills that you need to learn. But that is also down, we have a checklist. We've shown you how to do this. You confirm that you know how to do this. Tick, that's done. And obviously regular catch-ups with the line manager, regular reviews, constant feedback, of course, and of course also kind of being buddied up with a colleague who is experienced and does know, and not just being thrown in on your own. And obviously that can be a danger if you're in a team which is a little bit skeletal, but hopefully that you put a new starter with a buddy so that they can at least have a couple of weeks of getting up and running. I would hate to throw somebody really in the deep end, and that would then impact a guest experience because they were not fully equipped. So
I guess the thing you don't want to hear is that's not my job, because with a collective responsibility, maybe.
No. So I know that this is sometimes a controversial thing to bring up, but just obviously different hotels have different colleague setups in terms of, are they a union hotel and are they not a union hotel? And therefore you do have in that unionization where the colleague cannot do another person's job because that would go against the rules of the union. And planners need to be aware of that when they are operating. Langham hotels in the US are not union hotels, and therefore you would never ever hear that, because everybody, we're all working together as a team and supporting each other. But it's just, you've got to be clear so that you don't come across that. And I'm sure that Jacqueline has a lot of experience in New York City hotels where, I will put your coffee cup down, but somebody else will pour the coffee.
Okay.
That is exactly it. We just had it where we brought treats to the hotel, packaged food to give it, and we were told we really can't have that open and served here at the hotel, and we're just bringing some food. We want to be respectful, but it wasn't that we were ordering 20 pizza for the crew that's loading in. It was just a gift to bring that was indigenous to New York City. So
yeah, so if you need that flexibility, then think of that during the site selection.
yeah.
Okay, great. Are there any last comments? I mean, there are some more comments in the chat, but we're sort of running out of time. Somebody wants to talk tips.
Yeah, let's have a whole other webinar on that.
Yeah. And
we're filling up your content calendar here.
well,
I think tips are always gratefully received, but not expected.
So when they are, yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you so much. It has been a real learning experience for me, and I hope for all of our attendees who were online. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Honored to
Thank
be
you.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you.